What if I told you that before a man ever took his first breath, God declared he would overcome his older, stronger brother? That a single bowl of stew would reshape the destiny of nations? That a deceiver would become the father of God's chosen people? This is the story of Jacob, a man whose very birth was a prophecy, whose name meant supplanter, and whose life was marked by divine encounters that defy explanation. He stole blessings that weren't his, yet God called him anyway. He ran for his life into exile, yet saw heaven open above him in the wilderness. He worked 14 years for love, was deceived by the very tactics he once used, and built a family that would become 12 tribes. But the most astonishing moment came on a dark night by a river, when Jacob, alone, terrified, and desperate, grabbed hold of a mysterious figure and refused to let go until he received a blessing. That night, he wrestled with God himself until dawn, and neither heaven nor earth would ever see him the same way again. By sunrise, the deceiver had a new name, a new identity, and a permanent limp to prove that some encounters with the Almighty change you forever. This is his story. Long before Jacob ever opened his eyes to see the world, God had already spoken about his life. His mother, Rebekah, was pregnant, but something strange was happening inside her. The babies in her womb were pushing against each other, struggling so violently that she wondered what was going on. This wasn't normal. So Rebekah did what any person should do when confused. She went to ask the Lord. God's answer was stunning. He told her something that would echo through all of history, as we read in Genesis 25:23, "And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger." Think about that for a moment. God wasn't just talking about 2 baby boys. He was talking about 2 entire nations that would come from these children. And here's the shocking part. The older one, who by all customs and laws should be the leader, would end up serving the younger one. This went against everything people believed at that time. The firstborn son was supposed to get the biggest inheritance, the family leadership, everything. But God said it would be backwards. The second son would be the one who mattered most. Rebekah carried this prophecy in her heart. She knew her sons were marked for something extraordinary before they even took their first breath. When the time came for Rebekah to give birth, the prophecy began to unfold in the most unusual way. Genesis 25:24-26 tells us what happened. "And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them." The first baby came out covered in red hair, so much hair that he looked like he was wearing a fur coat. They named him Esau. But here's where it gets interesting. The second baby wasn't willing to just come out quietly. Jacob emerged, grabbing onto his brother's heel, as if he was trying to pull Esau back and come out first himself. From the very first moment of life, Jacob was fighting for that top position. His parents named him Jacob, which means heel grabber, or he grasps the heel, but the name had a deeper meaning too. It could also mean supplanter, someone who takes another person's place. That name would prove to be prophetic in ways nobody could imagine yet. Isaac was 60 years old when his sons were born, and right from the start, everyone could see these boys were going to be different from each other. As Jacob and Esau grew up, they became completely opposite types of people. Genesis 25:27-28 shows us how different they were. "And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison. But Rebekah loved Jacob." Esau loved the outdoors. He became an expert hunter, always out in the wild, tracking animals, living rough, bringing home fresh meat. He was probably strong, tanned, adventurous, the kind of son who made his father proud with his masculine skills. Isaac loved Esau, and the Bible is honest about why. Because Esau brought him delicious wild game to eat. There was something about that savory venison that made Isaac favor his firstborn son. Jacob was different. He was a quiet man who stayed around the tents. He wasn't out chasing animals through the wilderness. He was more thoughtful, more domestic, more careful in his ways. The Bible calls him a plain man, which means he was simple, honest in his manner, someone who preferred the safety and comfort of home. And while Isaac favored Esau, Rebekah loved Jacob. Maybe she remembered God's prophecy. Maybe she saw something special in this younger son. Or maybe Jacob simply spent more time with her and they understood each other better. Whatever the reason, the family was divided. Father loved one son, mother loved the other. This kind of favoritism would lead to serious problems. One ordinary day, something happened that would change the entire future of both brothers. Jacob was at home cooking a pot of lentil stew. The smell must have been wonderful, rich, earthy, savory. Meanwhile, Esau had been out in the fields, probably hunting all day, and he came home exhausted and starving. Genesis 25:29-30 captures the moment. And Jacob sod pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, "Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint." Therefore was his name called Edom. Esau was so hungry and tired that he could barely think straight. He saw that red stew and his stomach took over his brain. He didn't even call it by its proper name. He just pointed and said essentially, "Give me some of that red stuff." He was so focused on that red stew that it became another name for him, Edom, which means red. But Jacob saw something in this moment. He saw an opportunity, and what he said next was calculated and shocking. Genesis 25:31 tells us, "And Jacob said, 'Sell me this day thy birthright.'" The birthright. This wasn't just about being the oldest son. The birthright meant you got a double portion of your father's inheritance. It meant you became the head of the family when your father died. It meant you carried on the family line and received the special blessing. In their case, it meant inheriting the covenant promises God had made to their grandfather Abraham and their father Isaac. Jacob wanted it, and he was willing to trade a bowl of soup for it. Now, any reasonable person would have laughed at such an offer. A bowl of stew for your entire inheritance, for your position as family leader, for the promises of God? It was ridiculous. But Esau didn't laugh. He didn't even hesitate. Genesis 25:32-34 shows us Esau's response. And Esau said, "Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me this day." And he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau's reasoning was dramatic and foolish. "I'm about to die anyway," he said. He wasn't actually dying. He was just very hungry. But in his mind, his immediate physical need was more important than any future blessing. What good is an inheritance if you starve today? That's how he saw it. Jacob made him swear an oath. This wasn't a casual deal. An oath was binding, serious, sacred. Esau swore, he promised, he gave up his birthright officially. And then he ate the stew, drank some water, got up and left. Just like that, he satisfied his hunger and walked away as if nothing important had happened. The Bible's final comment is devastating. Thus Esau despised his birthright. He treated it like it was worthless. He had no respect for the spiritual significance of what he'd just given away. He lived for the moment, for his physical appetites, for what felt good right now. The future didn't matter to him. The promises of God didn't matter to him. Only the present mattered. This wasn't Jacob tricking him or forcing him. Esau made his choice with clear eyes and a full stomach afterward, and that choice revealed everything about his character. Years passed, Isaac grew old, and his body began to fail him. Genesis 27:1-4 sets up what happened next. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son, and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field and take me some venison, and make me savory meat such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. Isaac couldn't see any more. His eyes had grown too dim. He knew death was approaching, and he wanted to give his blessing to Esau before he died. This blessing was powerful. When a father spoke a blessing over his son, it wasn't just nice words. It carried spiritual authority and prophetic weight. It would determine the son's future. Isaac told Esau to go hunting, kill some wild game, prepare it the way Isaac loved it, and bring it back. Then Isaac would eat and give Esau the blessing. Isaac still loved that savory meat, even in his old age. And he was determined to bless Esau, his favorite son, regardless of what had happened with the birthright years before. But someone was listening. Genesis 27:5 says, And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son. Rebekah heard everything, and she remembered God's prophecy. The younger would rule over the older. She remembered that Jacob, not Esau, was supposed to receive the primary blessing. Whether Isaac had forgotten God's word or was choosing to ignore it, Rebekah decided she had to act. She quickly found Jacob and told him what was happening. Genesis 27:6-10 records her urgent instructions. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. Rebekah had a plan. Instead of wild game, they would use goats from their own flock. She would cook them exactly the way Isaac liked, and Jacob would bring the food to his father and receive the blessing instead of Esau. It was bold. It was deceptive. But Rebekah believed it was necessary to fulfill God's plan. Jacob wasn't completely comfortable with this plan. He saw an obvious problem that could ruin everything. Genesis 27:11-12 shows his concern. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. Jacob knew his father couldn't see, but Isaac could certainly touch. Esau was covered in body hair, thick and rough. Jacob's skin was smooth. If Isaac touched him and felt smooth skin instead of Esau's hairiness, the deception would be exposed. And instead of receiving a blessing, Jacob would bring a curse on himself. He would be revealed as a liar and a fraud. But Rebekah was determined. Genesis 27:13 records her remarkable response. And his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice, and go fetch me them. She was willing to take the curse herself. She believed so strongly that this was right that she would accept any consequences. She told Jacob to just obey her and get the goats. So Jacob did, and Rebekah went to work. Genesis 27:14-17 tells us, And he went and fetched and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. Rebekah was thorough. She cooked the meat perfectly, making it taste like wild game. She took Esau's best clothes, which apparently she kept in the house, and dressed Jacob in them. This way he would smell like Esau, who spent his time outdoors. And then came the brilliant touch. She took the skins of the young goats and wrapped them around Jacob's hands and neck. Now, if Isaac touched him, he would feel something hairy like Esau's skin. Jacob was transformed. He looked like himself, but he smelled like Esau and felt like Esau. The disguise was complete. Jacob walked into his father's tent carrying the meal, his heart probably pounding. Genesis 27:18-19 captures the moment. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. The lie came out directly. I am Esau thy firstborn. Jacob claimed to be his brother. He said he had done everything Isaac asked. He told his blind father to sit up and eat so he could give the blessing. But Isaac was immediately suspicious. Something felt wrong. Genesis 27:20 shows Isaac's doubt, and Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. Isaac couldn't believe Esau had hunted and prepared the meal so fast. It should have taken hours. Jacob had an answer ready. God helped me find it quickly. He even brought God's name into his deception, which made the lie even worse. Isaac still wasn't convinced. Genesis 27:21-23 tells us what happened next. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, as his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. This was the crucial test. Isaac told Jacob to come close. He reached out and touched him, and his confusion is almost painful to read. The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Isaac heard one son but felt another. His senses were giving him conflicting information, but the hairy goatskins worked. Isaac's sense of touch overpowered his sense of hearing. He convinced himself it must be Esau, so he decided to give the blessing. But even then, Isaac asked one more time to be absolutely sure. Genesis 27:24 says, And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. Jacob lied again directly to his father's face. I am. Two words that sealed the deception. Isaac told him to bring the food close. Genesis 27:25-27 continues, And he said, Bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat, and he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near, and kissed him. And he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him. Isaac ate the meal. He drank the wine. Then he asked Jacob to come kiss him. When Jacob leaned in, Isaac smelled Esau's clothes on him, the smell of the outdoors, of the fields. That smell convinced Isaac completely. This had to be Esau. And so Isaac gave the blessing. Genesis 27:27-29 records these powerful words. And he said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord hath blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. The blessing was everything. Isaac blessed Jacob with abundance, dew from heaven, rich soil, plenty of grain and wine. He blessed him with authority. People would serve him, nations would bow to him. He specifically said, "Be Lord over thy brethren, rule over your brothers." And then the ultimate blessing, "Cursed be anyone who curses you, blessed be anyone who blesses you." This was the same blessing God had given to Abraham. The blessing was done, it was spoken. And in that culture, once a father's blessing was given, it couldn't be taken back. Jacob had successfully deceived his father and stolen his brother's blessing. Jacob had barely left his father's tent when everything fell apart. Genesis 27:30 tells us the timing. "And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting." Esau walked in with the real wild game, ready to receive his blessing. He had no idea what had just happened. Genesis 27:31-33 shows us the terrible discovery. "And he also had made savory meat, and brought it unto his father, and said unto his father, Let my father arise and eat of his son's venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac his father said unto him, Who art thou? And he said, I am thy son, thy firstborn Esau. And Isaac trembled very exceedingly, and said, Who? Where is he that hath taken venison and brought it me? And I have eaten of all before thou camest, and have blessed him. Yea, and he shall be blessed. Isaac began to shake violently when he realized what had happened. Someone had come before Esau. Someone had brought food and received the blessing, and that blessing couldn't be undone. When Isaac said, Yea, and he shall be blessed, he was confirming that whoever received the blessing would keep it. It was final. Esau understood immediately. Genesis 27:34 captures his anguish. And when Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with a great and exceeding bitter cry, and said unto him, Bless me, even me also, O my father. His cry was deep and bitter. He begged his father to bless him too. Genesis 27:35-36 continues, And he said, Thy brother came with subtlety, and hath taken away thy blessing. And he said, Is not he rightly named Jacob? For he hath supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright. And behold, now he hath taken away my blessing. And he said, Hast thou not reserved a blessing for me? Esau connected the dots. Jacob had taken the birthright years ago, and now he had taken the blessing. The name Jacob, supplanter, had proven true twice. Esau asked desperately if there was any blessing left for him. Isaac could only offer a lesser blessing. Genesis 27:39-40 records it. And Isaac his father answered and said unto him, Behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth, and of the dew of heaven from above. And by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. Esau would live by his sword and serve his brother. The prophecy from before their birth was now locked in place through Isaac's blessing. But Esau's grief turned into something darker. Genesis 27:41 reveals his thoughts. And Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing wherewith his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then will I slay my brother Jacob. Esau decided to kill Jacob. He was just waiting for their father to die first, out of respect for Isaac, but then he would murder his brother. The hatred burned in his heart, and he planned the moment of revenge. Somehow, Rebekah found out about Esau's plan. Genesis 27:42-45 shows her urgent response, and these words of Esau, her elder son, were told to Rebekah. And she sent and called Jacob her younger son, and said unto him, Behold, thy brother Esau, as touching thee, doth comfort himself, purposing to kill thee. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice, and arise, flee thou to Laban my brother to Haran, and tarry with him a few days, until thy brother's fury turn away, until thy brother's anger turn away from thee, and he forget that which thou hast done to him. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I be deprived also of you both in one day?" Rebekah told Jacob to run. She sent him to her brother Laban in Haran, far away. She thought it would only be for a short time, just until Esau's anger cooled down. She believed Esau would eventually forget what Jacob had done. She had no idea Jacob would be gone for 20 years. She would never see her beloved son again. Rebekah also convinced Isaac to send Jacob away officially, using a different reason. Genesis 27:46-28 tells us, "And Rebekah said to Isaac, I am weary of my life because of the daughters of Heth. If Jacob take a wife of the daughters of Heth, such as these which are of the daughters of the land, what good shall my life do me?" And Isaac called Jacob, and blessed him, and charged him, and said unto him, "Thou shalt not take a wife of the daughters of Canaan. Arise, go to Padanaram, to the house of Bethuel, thy mother's father, and take thee a wife from thence of the daughters of Laban, thy mother's brother." Isaac agreed with Rebekah's concern. He didn't want Jacob marrying local Canaanite women like Esau had done. So he officially sent Jacob to find a wife among their own relatives in Haran. Jacob left, running for his life, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back and his father's blessing. He didn't know when or if he would ever return home. Jacob traveled alone, leaving everything familiar behind. He was a fugitive now, fleeing from his brother's murderous rage. As the sun began to set one evening, he needed to find a place to sleep. Genesis 28:10-11 sets the scene. "And Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he lighted upon a certain place and tarried there all night, because the sun was set. And he took of the stones of that place and put them for his pillows, and lay down in that place to sleep." Jacob had no tent, no comfortable bed, nothing. He found some stones, used them as a pillow, and lay down in the open air under the stars. He was probably exhausted, afraid, and uncertain about his future. He had gained a blessing but lost his home, his family, and his security. Then something extraordinary happened while he slept. Genesis 28:12-15 describes the dream that would change everything. "And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham thy father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon thou liest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed. And thy seed shall be as the dust of the earth. And thou shalt spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in thee and in thy seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again into this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken to thee of." Jacob saw a ladder, or a stairway, connecting earth to heaven. Angels were going up and down on it, moving between heaven and earth, and at the top stood the Lord himself. God spoke directly to Jacob, identifying himself as the God of Abraham and Isaac. Then God made incredible promises to this runaway deceiver. God promised Jacob the very land he was sleeping on would belong to him and his descendants. God promised his offspring would be as countless as the dust of the earth, spreading in every direction. God promised that all families on earth would be blessed through Jacob and his descendants. And most importantly for Jacob in that frightening moment, God promised to be with him wherever he went, to protect him, and to bring him back home safely. This was the same covenant God had made with Abraham and Isaac. Now God was confirming it with Jacob. Despite everything Jacob had done, the deception, the lies, God was choosing to work through him. When Jacob woke up, he was completely overwhelmed. Genesis 28:16-17 captures his reaction. "And Jacob awaked out of his sleep, and he said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he was afraid and said, "How dreadful is this place! This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Jacob realized he had been sleeping on holy ground. The word dreadful here means awesome or fear-inspiring. This place commanded deep respect and wonder. He called it the house of God and the gate of heaven. Genesis 28:18-19 shows what Jacob did next. And Jacob rose up early in the morning and took the stone that he had put for his pillows and set it up for a pillar and poured oil upon the top of it. And he called the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city was called Luz at the first. Jacob took the stone he had slept on and stood it upright as a memorial pillar. He poured oil on top of it, consecrating it as a sacred marker. He renamed the place Bethel, which means house of God. Then Jacob made a vow to God. Genesis 28:20-22 records his promise. And Jacob vowed a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat, and raiment to put on, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God, and this stone which I have set for a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that thou shalt give me, I will surely give the 10th unto thee." Jacob made a conditional vow. If God would be with him, protect him, provide food and clothing, and bring him home safely, then the Lord would be his God. He promised to give back a 10th of everything God gave him. Jacob continued his journey with new hope. Jacob kept traveling eastward until he reached the land of the people of the East. Genesis 29:1-3 describes what he found. Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the East. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. Jacob came upon a well in an open field. 3 flocks of sheep were lying near it, waiting. There was a large stone covering the mouth of the well. The local custom was that all the shepherds would gather together with their flocks. Then they would work together to roll the heavy stone away from the well's opening. Jacob saw some shepherds there and started asking questions. Genesis 29:4-6 tells us, "And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep." Perfect timing. Jacob asked where they were from, and they said Haran, exactly where he needed to be. Then Jacob asked if they knew Laban. They did know him, and just as they were talking, Laban's daughter Rachel was coming with her sheep. Then Rachel arrived with her father's flock. Genesis 29:9-10 captures this significant moment. "And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother." When Jacob saw Rachel, something happened inside him. Without waiting for the other shepherds, without waiting for help, Jacob went to the well by himself and rolled that heavy stone away. This stone usually required multiple men to move it, but Jacob did it alone. He watered Laban's entire flock. This was Jacob showing off, displaying his strength to impress this young woman. What happened next was deeply emotional. Genesis 29:11-12 tells us, "And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice, and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son, and she ran and told her father." Jacob kissed Rachel, a customary family greeting, and then burst into tears. After his long, lonely journey, after fleeing from home, he had finally reached his destination. He had found his family. The emotion overwhelmed him. He explained who he was, and Rachel immediately ran home to tell her father. Laban's reaction was enthusiastic. Genesis 29:13-14 says, "And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month." Laban ran out to meet Jacob, embraced him, and brought him home. Jacob told Laban everything that had happened. Laban acknowledged Jacob as family, and Jacob stayed with him for a month. During that month, Jacob worked for Laban. Then Laban brought up the issue of payment. Genesis 29:15 records it. "And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be?" Laban didn't want Jacob working for free just because they were relatives. He asked Jacob to name his wages. This seemed generous, but Laban was also a shrewd businessman. Jacob knew exactly what he wanted. Genesis 29:16-18 tells us, "And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter." Laban had 2 daughters. The Bible describes Leah as tender-eyed, which could mean her eyes were weak or gentle, but the contrast with Rachel suggests she wasn't as attractive. Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel. So Jacob made his offer. He would work for Laban for 7 years in exchange for permission to marry Rachel. This was an enormous bride price, but Jacob was willing to pay it. Laban's response seemed agreeable. Genesis 29:19 says, "And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me." Laban said it was better to give Rachel to Jacob than to an outsider. But notice that Laban didn't explicitly say, "Yes, you can marry Rachel after 7 years." He just said to stay. This vague language should have been a warning. Genesis 29:20 shows us how Jacob felt about those 7 years. "And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days for the love he had to her." 7 years, 2,555 days of hard work. But because Jacob loved Rachel so deeply, those years flew by like days. Love made the time seem short. Jacob worked faithfully, counting down to the day he could finally marry the woman he loved. Finally, the 7 years were complete. Jacob had kept his end of the bargain. Genesis 29:21 shows his request. "And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her." Jacob's words were direct and legitimate. He had worked 7 years. The time was up. He wanted his wife. He wanted to consummate the marriage with Rachel. Laban agreed to hold the wedding. Genesis 29:22-23 tells us what happened. "And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him, and he went in unto her." Laban threw a big wedding feast. Everyone from the area came to celebrate. There was probably plenty of food and wine. Then, in the evening when it was dark, Laban brought the bride to Jacob's tent. But it wasn't Rachel. It was Leah. How did this happen? In that culture, brides were heavily veiled during the wedding ceremony. Jacob couldn't see her face. It was dark. Jacob, trusting that Laban would keep his word, didn't verify who was under the veil. He consummated the marriage with the woman he thought was Rachel. Genesis 29:24 adds a detail. "And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid." Laban even gave Leah a servant, Zilpah, as part of the marriage arrangement. Everything appeared legitimate and official. But when morning came, the deception was revealed. Genesis 29:25 captures Jacob's shock. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah, and he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? Imagine Jacob's reaction. He woke up, looked at his new wife in the morning light, and realized it was Leah, not Rachel. He immediately confronted Laban. What have you done to me? He had worked 7 years for Rachel. Why had Laban deceived him? The word Jacob used, beguiled, is significant. It's related to the same root as Jacob's own name. Jacob, the deceiver, the supplanter, was now the one being deceived. The man who had tricked his father was now experiencing what it felt like to be on the receiving end of trickery. Laban had an excuse ready. Genesis 29:26 records it. And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Laban claimed it was against their custom to marry off the younger daughter before the older one. But if this was true, why hadn't he mentioned it 7 years ago when Jacob asked for Rachel? Why did he let Jacob work all that time without clarifying this rule? The answer is obvious. Laban was a manipulator. He had used Jacob's love for Rachel to get 14 years of labor instead of 7. Then Laban made another proposal. Genesis 29:27 tells us, Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years. Laban told Jacob to complete the bridal week with Leah, the 7 days of wedding celebration. Then he would give Rachel to Jacob as well, but it would cost another 7 years of work. Jacob was trapped. He had already consummated the marriage with Leah. In that culture, he couldn't undo it. And he still desperately wanted Rachel. So he had no choice but to agree to Laban's terms. Jacob agreed to Laban's proposal. Genesis 29:28-30 tells us what happened. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week. And he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid, to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. Jacob finished the week-long celebration with Leah. Then Laban gave him Rachel as his second wife. Laban also gave Rachel a servant named Bilhah. Jacob finally married the woman he loved and consummated that marriage too. The Bible is honest about Jacob's feelings. He loved Rachel more than Leah. This wasn't fair to Leah, but it was the truth. Jacob had worked 7 years for Rachel, not Leah. His heart belonged to Rachel. And now Jacob had committed to another 7 years of labor. He would work a total of 14 years for Laban, all because he loved Rachel. That's dedication. That's perseverance. That's what love made Jacob willing to sacrifice. Jacob now found himself in a complicated family situation. He had 2 wives who were sisters, and they both lived in the same household. This arrangement would create tension, jealousy, and competition in the years ahead. God saw what was happening in Jacob's family. Genesis 29:31 tells us, And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. The word hated here means unloved or less loved. God saw that Leah was in a painful position, married to a man who didn't love her the way he loved her sister. So God showed compassion to Leah by allowing her to have children while Rachel remained unable to conceive. Leah had her first son. Genesis 29:32 records the naming, And Leah conceived, and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction, now therefore my husband will love me. She named him Reuben, which means, See, a son. Leah hoped that giving Jacob a son would make him love her. She had 3 more sons in succession. Genesis 29:33-35 tells us, And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again, and bare a son. And she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. She named them Simeon, Levi, and Judah. With Judah, whose name means praise, Leah finally stopped trying to earn Jacob's love through childbearing. Instead, she simply praised the Lord. Meanwhile, Rachel was desperate. Genesis 31:2 shows her anguish. And when Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister, and said unto Jacob, Give me children, or else I die. And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, Am I in God's stead, who hath withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? Rachel was jealous of Leah. She demanded children from Jacob. Jacob got angry. He couldn't give her children. Only God could do that. So Rachel used a strategy. Genesis 33:6 tells us, And she said, Behold my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. And she gave him Bilhah her handmaid to wife, and Jacob went in unto her. And Bilhah conceived, and bare Jacob a son. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son. Therefore called she his name Dan. Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob. Any children Bilhah had would legally count as Rachel's. Bilhah had a son named Dan. Genesis 37:8 continues, And Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again, and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, With great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali. Bilhah had another son named Naphtali. Rachel saw this as a competition with Leah. Not to be outdone, Leah gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob. Genesis 39:13 tells us, When Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah her maid, and gave her Jacob to wife. And Zilpah Leah's maid bare Jacob a son. And Leah said, A troop cometh, and she called his name Gad. And Zilpah Leah's maid bare Jacob a second son. And Leah said, Happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher. Zilpah had 2 sons, Gad and Asher. Later, Leah had 2 more sons and a daughter. Genesis 30:17-21 records, And God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived, and bare Jacob the 5th son. And Leah said, God hath given me my hire, because I have given my maiden to my husband. And she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again, and bare Jacob the 6th son. And Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she called his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bare a daughter, and called her name Dinah. She named them Issachar, Zebulun, and Dinah. Finally, God remembered Rachel. Genesis 30:22-24 records this blessed moment. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her, and opened her womb. And she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, The Lord shall add to me another son. Rachel finally had her own son. She named him Joseph. The shame of barrenness was removed from her. These children would become the foundation of the 12 tribes of Israel. After Joseph was born, Jacob wanted to leave. Genesis 30:25-26 shows his request. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, Send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done thee. Jacob had fulfilled his 14 years of service. He wanted to take his family and return home, but Laban didn't want Jacob to leave. Genesis 30:27-28 reveals why. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, For I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. And he said, Appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. Laban admitted that God had blessed him because of Jacob. He asked Jacob to name his wages and stay longer. Jacob agreed, but with specific terms. Genesis 30:31-32 records the deal. And he said, What shall I give thee? And Jacob said, Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock, all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. Jacob would take only the speckled, spotted, and dark-colored animals as wages. Laban agreed, thinking this would give Jacob very few animals, since most sheep were white and most goats were dark. But Jacob was clever. Genesis 30:37-39 describes his method. And Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob used selective breeding techniques. He placed striped branches at the watering places where the stronger animals would mate. The animals produced speckled and spotted offspring that belonged to Jacob. Genesis 30:43 shows the result. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle and maidservants and menservants and camels and asses. Jacob became very wealthy. God blessed him abundantly, and he built up large flocks despite Laban's attempts to manipulate him. The deceiver had learned to navigate deception, and God prospered him in the process. Jacob had been with Laban for 20 years now. He had become wealthy, but he also noticed that Laban and his sons were growing hostile toward him. Genesis 31:1-2 shows us the tension. And he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Laban's sons were complaining. They believed Jacob had taken what rightfully belonged to their father. They saw Jacob's wealth and felt cheated. And when Jacob looked at Laban's face, he could see the relationship had changed. Laban no longer looked at him with favor. The atmosphere had become dangerous. Then God intervened. Genesis 31:3 records the divine command. And the Lord said unto Jacob, Return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. God told Jacob it was time to go home, return to the land of his fathers, to his own people, and God promised to be with him. This was the moment Jacob had been waiting for. God was fulfilling the promise he had made at Bethel 20 years earlier to bring Jacob back home. Jacob called Rachel and Leah out to the field where his flocks were. He needed to talk to them privately, away from Laban's household. Genesis 31:4-7 shows what he told them. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And ye know that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. Jacob explained everything to his wives. Their father's attitude had changed toward him. But God had been with Jacob through it all. Jacob had worked hard and faithfully, yet Laban had deceived him and changed his wages 10 times. Despite Laban's tricks, God had protected Jacob and made him prosper. Then Jacob told them about a dream. Genesis 31:10-13 records it. And it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes and see. All the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointedst the pillar, and where thou vowedst a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. In the dream, God's angel showed Jacob that God himself was behind Jacob's prosperity. God had seen everything Laban had done to Jacob. The angel identified himself as the God of Bethel, the God who had appeared to Jacob 20 years earlier. Now, God was telling Jacob to leave and return home. Rachel and Leah responded without hesitation. Genesis 31:14-16 shows their agreement. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. The sisters were united in their response. They had no inheritance left in their father's house. Laban had treated them like strangers, had sold them to Jacob, and had consumed the bride price. They agreed that the wealth God had given Jacob rightfully belonged to them and their children. Whatever God told Jacob to do, they would support him. Jacob made his decision. He would leave while Laban was away. Genesis 31:17-18 tells us, Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Paddan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. Jacob put his wives and children on camels and gathered all his livestock and possessions. He was heading back to Canaan, to his father Isaac. This was a massive undertaking, moving an entire household with large flocks. Genesis 31:19-20 adds an important detail. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. Laban was away shearing his sheep when Jacob left. Rachel secretly took her father's household idols. Jacob left without telling Laban. He essentially snuck away. Genesis 31:21 describes the departure. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. Jacob crossed the Euphrates River and headed toward the hill country of Gilead. He was making his escape with everything he owned. 3 days later, Laban found out. Genesis 31:22-23 shows his response. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. Laban gathered his relatives and chased after Jacob. They traveled hard for 7 days, and finally caught up with Jacob in the mountains of Gilead. This was a dangerous situation. Laban had armed men with him, and Jacob's family was vulnerable. But God intervened again. Genesis 31:24 tells us, And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night, and said unto him, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. The night before Laban reached Jacob, God appeared to Laban in a dream. God warned him not to say anything to Jacob, neither good nor bad. This was God's protection over Jacob. Laban was not to threaten him or try to persuade him to return. The next day, Laban confronted Jacob. Genesis 31:25-28 records the conversation. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the Mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, What hast thou done, that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters, as captives taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, and steal away from me? And didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth, and with songs, with tabret, and with harp, and hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing." Laban acted hurt and offended. He accused Jacob of sneaking away and treating his daughters like war captives. He claimed he would have thrown a farewell party with music and celebration if Jacob had only told him. He said Jacob had foolishly prevented him from kissing his grandchildren goodbye. Then Laban revealed what he really wanted to do. Genesis 31:29 shows his threat. "It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad." Laban admitted he had the power to harm Jacob. He had enough men to hurt Jacob's family, but God had stopped him. Laban couldn't touch Jacob because God had warned him in the dream. Still, Laban had one more accusation. Genesis 31:30 continues, "And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longedst after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" Laban demanded to know why Jacob had stolen his household gods. He didn't know that Rachel, not Jacob, had taken them. Jacob defended himself strongly. Genesis 31:36-37 shows his response. "And Jacob was wroth, and chode with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, What is my trespass? What is my sin, that thou hast so hotly pursued after me, whereas thou hast searched all my stuff? What hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both." Jacob got angry. He challenged Laban to show what he had found. Laban had searched through everything Jacob owned, but found nothing. Jacob was innocent of stealing Laban's gods. Jacob continued his defense, reminding Laban of all he had done. Genesis 31:38-41 records his powerful words. "This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was. In the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle, and thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Jacob laid out everything. For 20 years he had served Laban faithfully. The flocks had thrived under his care. When animals were killed by wild beasts, Jacob took the loss himself rather than charging Laban. He worked in scorching heat during the day and freezing cold at night, losing sleep to protect Laban's property. 14 years he worked for Rachel and Leah, 6 more years for the livestock. And through it all, Laban had changed his wages 10 times, always trying to cheat him. Then Jacob made his final point. Genesis 31:42 declares, "Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight." Jacob credited God for everything. If God hadn't been with him, Laban would have sent him away with nothing. But God had seen Jacob's hard work and suffering. God had rebuked Laban in the dream the night before. Laban had no good response. Genesis 31:43 shows his weak reply. "And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, These daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne?" Laban tried to claim everything, the daughters, the grandchildren, the livestock. But he knew he couldn't do anything about it now. God had tied his hands. So Laban suggested making a covenant. Genesis 31:44 says, "Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee." They needed a formal agreement to prevent future conflict. Genesis 31:45-46 describes what they did. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, Gather stones. And they took stones and made an heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. Jacob set up a stone pillar as a monument. Then they gathered more stones into a heap and shared a meal together on top of it. This was a covenant ceremony. They gave the place a name. Genesis 31:47-48 tells us, And Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha, but Jacob called it Galeed. And Laban said, This heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galeed. Both names meant the same thing in different languages, heap of witness. This pile of stones would serve as a witness to their agreement. Genesis 31:49-50 records Laban's oath. And Mizpah, for he said, The Lord watch between me and thee, when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. Laban called on God to watch between them when they were apart. He warned Jacob not to mistreat his daughters or take other wives. God would be their witness. This sounds spiritual, but it was really a threat. Laban was saying, God is watching you, Jacob. Genesis 31:51-52 continues, And Laban said to Jacob, Behold this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The stones marked a boundary. Laban promised not to cross this line to harm Jacob. Jacob promised not to cross it to harm Laban. It was a non-aggression pact. The next morning they parted ways. Genesis 31:55 tells us, And early in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. Laban kissed his grandchildren and daughters goodbye, blessed them, and went back home. Jacob was finally free from Laban's control. Jacob continued his journey toward home. Genesis 32:1-2 describes what happened next. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, This is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Angels met Jacob on his journey. When he saw them, he recognized them as God's army. He named the place Mahanaim, which means two camps, his own camp and God's camp. This was encouraging. God was with him. But now Jacob faced his biggest fear, Esau. He sent messengers ahead to his brother. Genesis 32:3-5 shows his message. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, and I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. Jacob's message was humble and respectful. He called Esau my lord, and referred to himself as thy servant. He explained where he had been and that he now had wealth. He hoped to find favor in Esau's eyes. Jacob was trying to approach peacefully. The messengers returned with terrifying news. Genesis 32:6 tells us, And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Esau was coming, and he had 400 men with him. This was not a peaceful family reunion. 400 men meant an army. Jacob immediately thought the worst. Esau was coming to kill him and his entire family. Genesis 32:7 shows Jacob's reaction. Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 bands. Jacob was terrified. He split his entire company into 2 groups. Genesis 32:8 explains his strategy. and said, "If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. If Esau attacked one group, at least the other group might survive." Jacob was preparing for the worst. Then Jacob did something he hadn't done in a long time. He prayed. Genesis 32, 9-12 records this desperate prayer. "And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, Return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies, and of all the truth, which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau. For I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." This prayer reveals Jacob's heart. He called on the God of his fathers. He reminded God that it was God who told him to return home. He acknowledged he wasn't worthy of God's mercy and faithfulness. He remembered crossing the Jordan River 20 years ago with only his staff, and now he had become two large groups. He begged God to deliver him from Esau. He was afraid Esau would kill everyone, the mothers and children included. And he reminded God of his promises to do Jacob good and make his descendants as numerous as the sand of the sea. This was Jacob at his most vulnerable, crying out to God for help. After praying, Jacob took action. He decided to send a massive gift to Esau. Genesis 32, 13, 15 lists what he prepared. And he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals. This was an enormous gift, 550 animals in total, 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 female camels with their young, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. This represented a significant portion of Jacob's wealth. Jacob divided these animals into separate groups and gave specific instructions. Genesis 32, 16-17 tells us, "And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee?" Each group of animals was sent separately with space between them. Jacob told the first servant what to say when Esau met him. Genesis 32, 18, 19 records the instructions. "Then thou shalt say, They be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau, and behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, On this manner shall ye speak unto Esau, when ye find him." Every servant was to give the same message. "These animals are a gift from your servant Jacob to my lord Esau, and Jacob is coming behind us." Genesis 32:20 reveals Jacob's strategy. "And say ye moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me." Jacob hoped to appease Esau's anger with these gifts. Wave after wave of animals would reach Esau before Jacob arrived. Maybe by the time they met face to face, Esau would be willing to accept Jacob. Genesis 32:21 concludes, "So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company." The gifts went ahead. Jacob stayed behind with his family for one more night. That night, Jacob made another strategic move. Genesis 32:22-23 tells us, "And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. In the middle of the night, Jacob got up and took his entire family, his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and helped them cross the Jabbok River. He also sent all his possessions across. Everyone and everything crossed to the other side. But Jacob didn't cross with them. Genesis 32:24 says, "And Jacob was left alone." Jacob stayed behind on the other side of the river. He was completely alone. Why did he do this? Perhaps he needed time to think. Perhaps he wanted to pray more. Perhaps he was still afraid of what would happen when he met Esau and wanted his family safely across the river. Whatever his reason, Jacob found himself isolated in the darkness. And then something happened that would change Jacob forever. In the darkness, someone attacked Jacob. Genesis 32:24 continues, "And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day." A man appeared and began wrestling with Jacob. This wasn't a friendly match. This was a real fight, a struggle that lasted all night long. Who was this man? The Bible doesn't immediately tell us, but we'll discover his identity soon. Jacob fought with everything he had. Hour after hour in the darkness, the 2 figures grappled with each other. Neither would give up, neither would surrender. As dawn began to break, something changed. Genesis 32:25 tells us, "And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him." The mysterious man saw that he couldn't overpower Jacob, so he touched Jacob's hip socket, and Jacob's hip was wrenched out of joint. With a single touch, the man dislocated Jacob's hip. This revealed that this was no ordinary man. This was a divine being with supernatural power. But even with a dislocated hip, Jacob refused to let go. Genesis 32:26 shows what happened next. "And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me." The man asked Jacob to release him because dawn was breaking. But Jacob held on tight. Despite his pain, despite his injury, Jacob made a demand. "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob realized he was wrestling with a divine being, and he desperately wanted a blessing. Then the man asked Jacob a question. Genesis 32:27 records it. "And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob." The man asked Jacob for his name. Jacob answered, "Jacob." This was significant. Jacob's name meant deceiver or supplanter. Every time someone spoke his name, they remembered what he had done, how he had deceived his father and stolen his brother's blessing. His name carried shame and guilt. But now everything was about to change. Genesis 32:28 contains one of the most important verses in Jacob's story. "And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed." The man gave Jacob a new name, Israel. This name means he struggles with God, or God strives. The man explained why Jacob had struggled with God and with men, and he had prevailed. Jacob had wrestled with God himself and had not given up. This new name represented a new identity. Jacob was no longer just the deceiver. He was now Israel, the one who had contended with God and lived. Now it was Jacob's turn to ask. Genesis 32:29 tells us, "And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there." Jacob asked the man for his name. But the man didn't give it directly. Instead, he responded with a question and then blessed Jacob right there. The blessing Jacob had begged for was given. Jacob now understood who he had been wrestling with. Genesis 32:30 reveals his realization. "And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved." Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God. He had seen God face to face and survived. In that culture, people believed that seeing God would result in death. But Jacob had wrestled with God through the night and lived to tell about it. Genesis 32:31 describes the aftermath, and as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. As Jacob crossed over Peniel, the sun came up. He was limping because of his hip. The wrestling match had left him with a permanent physical reminder. For the rest of his life, Jacob would walk with a limp. Every step would remind him of the night he wrestled with God. Genesis 32:32 adds a final note. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. From that day forward, the Israelites would not eat the tendon attached to the hip socket, commemorating what happened to Jacob that night. Jacob emerged from that encounter transformed. He had gone into the night as Jacob the deceiver, the manipulator, the man running from his past. He came out as Israel, the one who had struggled with God. He had received a new name and a new identity. The blessing he had stolen from his father years ago had now been confirmed by God himself through this wrestling match. Jacob still had to face Esau, but he would face his brother as a different man, not as Jacob, but as Israel. The man who had spent his whole life running and scheming had finally been broken and remade by God. His limp was proof that true transformation requires struggle. And sometimes the breakthrough we need only comes when we refuse to let go of God, even in the darkest night, even when we're injured and exhausted, until He blesses us. If this story has inspired you, challenged you, or helped you see God's faithfulness in a new way, please subscribe to our channel. We're dedicated to bringing you more biblical stories that reveal God's character and His incredible plans for humanity. Hit that notification bell so you won't miss our next video. And don't keep this story to yourself. Share this video with your friends, family, and anyone who needs to hear about the God who transforms deceivers into princes, who turns our darkest nights into encounters with the divine, and who never gives up on us no matter how far we've run. Your share might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Thank you for watching, and may you, like Jacob, refuse to let go of God until He blesses you.